Greetings ladies and gents, and welcome to this video for Fork This Life, written by Jinxes 2011. This video contains chapter 34, and as always I hope that you enjoy, and if you do, you better forking subscribe. Chapter 34, the beginning of everyday school life for an everyday fork. Despite Dreyer thinking that it would take a few days before we heard anything, Dreyer received the letter the very next day. "It's from the Dean," Dreyer says, reading through it. "She wants to meet you in person." "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" I ask. Dreyer shrugs. "She probably's just curious, but whatever the reason, it seems she'll be the one making the final decision in your enrollment." "I guess so. When does she want to meet?" "This evening." The academy is large, with many different areas and rooms. Some of them I can see, but most of them are blocked from my view. Dreyer's office is actually one of these places. From the outside I can't see anything inside, but if I'm inside the room itself, I can see both the inside and the outside. The result of some magic that I couldn't begin to fathom, I'm sure. Another one of these places is the Dean's office. So as Dreyer hikes up yet another set of stairs, I have no clue what lies ahead. "I really wish they built this tower a bit lower," Dreyer huffs. "I have trouble climbing all these stairs. I'm a squirrel beastman. Must be torture on some people." At about the width of two people abreast, the staircase spirals up the interior of the tower, from the base to what I assume is the top without a single room in between. The tower is large enough that the staircase leaves a circle of empty space a few meters wide in the center, all the way up in what would be a horrendous safety hazard if not for the sturdy railing along the edge of the staircase. After about half an hour of climbing, a thoroughly exhausted Dreyer lifts a hand and knocks on the door. A brief moment of silence, and the door swings silently inwards to reveal that there is nobody behind it, but also another staircase. This one, however, has a dozen or so stairs, and Dreyer quickly reaches the top. Once there, I am finally able to see what lies within it. Or, more accurately, without it. This is indeed the top of the tower, but it isn't all how I imagined it would be. Rather than a room, this is a platform open to the elements on all sides but the bottom. We are in mere centimeters above the clouds, so it almost appears as if we could step off the platform onto the fluffy surface that extends for kilometers. The platform itself is mostly unadorned with furniture, featuring only a large desk with a few chairs positioned around it. At the edge of the platform behind the desk, there are a pair of doors that do not appear to lead anywhere. Sitting behind the desk is a woman dressed in a robe similar to everyone else in the academy, but she's almost incorporeal. Her body looks like it's flowing as if it were made of water. That aside, she's bright, extremely so. How much mana do you have to look like that? "Please, Dreyer, take a seat," the Dean says, gesturing gracefully with a hand. "You must be tired. Tea? Coffee?" Dreyer stumps into the proffered chair, placing me on the desk in front of him. "Tea, thanks, Cleo. If I have coffee, I won't be able to sit still." "Cleo?" I asked. "She's not fond of formalities," Dreyer replies. "Indeed, I find them to be a terrible waste of time," Cleo agrees. She gestures and the door behind her opens, and a now familiar vortex of mana swirling behind it. A teapot drifts out of the portal, seemingly unsupported, and the door shuts behind it as a thick tendril of cloud twists into a pot, filling it up. "You can intercept telepathy?" Dreyer asks, surprised. "You're a psychic." "I dabbled once. I was never talented, but I did manage to learn a few tricks." Cleo shrugs lightly and looks down at me. "It's true then, a living fork. Intriguing." "Yes, I never met anyone quite like him," Dreyer replies. With another gesture, a needle, a thread, what looks like some scrap of leather, a small knife and some leaves come drifting through the door and onto the desk. The leaves deposit themselves into the now boiling water of teapot, while the needle, thread and knife begin to work stitching something together out of the leather. "Nor have I," Cleo states, sliding one of the desk drawers open and retrieving two small objects from it before once again sliding it closed. Picking the now finished thingamajig up off the air, Cleo lifts me and fits it around my tines, inserting the two objects into it and securing them with flaps. With a small tug, she tightens the whole thing onto me and ties it into place. Drea looks at my new apparel with confusion. What's that? His uniform, so to speak, but also a tool. Cleo regarded her handiwork for a moment, nodding silently. The magical tool above you is called the Eye of Clairvoyance. It is normally used as a component in scouting and remotely controlled magical tools, but it'll work just the same here to give you sight and hearing. Just channel your mana into it where it touches you. Seriously? I tried immediately, channeling a trickle of mana into the object in my hand. A small portion of vision lights up in the colors of shadows. A little bit more, but I can hear what Cleo speaks, so I increase the flow of mana just a little bit more. There we are. Holy crepe! I actually heard something. I can hear. I can see. I can... Whoa, that's a little weird. Where the vision from the mana sight and from the Eye of Clairvoyance overlap, I can see both of them at once, overlaid upon each other. On one hand, I see a bright mass of mana in the shape of a woman where Cleo sits, twisting like currents of water. No. Air. On the other, I see a slightly transparent woman whose skin is moving and curling like she's made of mist instead of flesh. As I'm enjoying the new senses, Cleo speaks again. Below you is what is known as a ventriloquist's aid. It will let you speak aloud when you channel mana into it. It's quite similar to how you speak using telepathy, so you'll be able to use it without a problem. Seriously? Well, this certainly wasn't what I was expecting coming up here, but this is a nice surprise. I say, almost surprised by the sound of my own voice. Thanks for this. From what you've said, can I assume that my enrollment is successful? Skill gained, common language spoken, expert. You know most commonly used words in the common language. Only obscure and occupational specific words are likely to be outside of your knowledge. Huh. Am I speaking another language now using psychic translation, or is English called common here? That's quite all right, yes, I've approved your enrollment. There are very few at your age with skills similar to what you possess. How is it that you came to train them to such a standard at such an early stage of life? Cleo asks curiously. My God, that's something I must tremendously... Intonation. I can finally detect sarcasm again. Hallelujah. Well, I can't sleep, and as you can see, that's not exactly any way for me to do for hobbies or general social interactions others might use to pass the time, I replied wryly. I could either watch the days pass or experiment with mana, and the world just isn't as interesting without color. You sound as if you speak from experience, Cleo notes, raising her eyebrows. I do. I used to be human, believe it or not. Then somehow, I died, and the next thing I knew, I was a fork, I explained. I'll admit, I had some dark days back then, but parts of it have grown on me. Reincarnation? Such a thing lies solely in the hands of gods, Cleo muses. Which world were you from, Adwea? No. You probably haven't heard of the world I'm from, I say. I haven't heard the name Earth even mentioned since I was born into this world, not as a proper noun at least. I was from Earth. Earth. I seem to recall, looking to the sky, Cleo seems to remember something. Yes, I believe I went there once. It was a strange world, one without a system, mana, or anything else for that matter. That's it, all right, I say, surprised. I cannot imagine that the gods would be interested in a world of such as Earth, nor why one would choose to reincarnate you as a fork, of all things. Cleo shakes her head, perplexed. I must admit that I have never even heard of your kind before today. Are there others? No, I reply. Just me. You sound sure, Cleo notes. I have a title called Progenitor that states that I'm the first of my species. Given that I can't reproduce, unless the gods have been making more like me, I'm the only living fork there is and will ever be, I state frankly. The door opens and lets 2 teacups and saucers drift through. I see the barest glimpse of a room beyond the doors before they close. The teapot dips, pouring its contents into the cups, which drift to sit before Cleo and Drea. They each take a sip. While I would gladly hear more about yourself, I'm afraid I have little time left in my schedule, and we must get down to business. Cleo sets the teacup down with a light clink. Drea, my apologies, but I'll have to hear your adventures another time. No problem. I'll need to write up my experiences first anyway. My most recent notes got burned up in Ignis, Drea says with resignation. Cleo nods to him and then looks back to me. Those magic tools have been lent to you, not given as a gift. If they are damaged or destroyed, you must reimburse the Academy, and upon leaving the Academy you must return them. Sounds fair to me, I agree. Hopefully by the time I leave I won't need them anymore. You qualify for a scholarship, and your first term will be paid for, Cleo continues. Furthermore, as I've determined that you're a legitimate applicant, you will be granted 2,000 Ro. Ro? I ask. Drea replies, it's the currency used on Arbidak. Upon the completion of your first term, you will be assessed to determine whether you will continue to be eligible for the scholarship, Cleo explains. Apart from that, do you have a residence? He's staying with me for now, Drea says. Very well. Cleo takes another sip. Do you have any questions, Gerald? When does the term begin? I ask. Cleo smiles. Next week. Drea will explain everything you need to know before then. Then that's all I need to know, I say, already resigned to another wait. Setting down her teacup, Cleo stands from her chair. Thank you for both coming. This has been an interesting meeting. I found it illuminating myself, I reply, a hint of humour in my voice. Drea downs the rest of his tea in one gulp. Standing, he picks me up and nods deeply to Cleo. Thanks for the time, he says. Cleo nods slightly in return. Drea takes steps back down, the door closing behind us as we leave. Sighing, he starts to slow his descent back down. Well, she seemed nice, I say. You know that Cleo can still hear you, right? Drea shakes his head. Honestly, I'd be disappointed if she couldn't. With that level of control over the wind, I reply. There is no fire under that teapot. I have no clue how you'd even begin to boil water with there alone. Compared to that, a little eavesdropping must be practically like child's play. Even amongst sylphs, Cleo is a unique in her skill, Drea agrees. Sylphs, I ask. Wind spirits, they can naturally control the wind because they're a part of it. You normally don't see them, they rarely stay in one place for long, Drea explains. Cleo is one of the more rare few who keeps themselves grounded, so to speak. So what do I need to know about the Academy? I asked, changing the subject. Drea scratches his head. There's a lot, but most of it you should be able to figure out as you go along. Formerly, this place is known as Quantem Academy of Magic and Related Subjects, but most people just refer to it as Quantem Academy, or the Academy. I might have already mentioned it, but there are 4 terms a year. Before each term you pick your subjects. Technically, you can pick as many as you want, but in reality, clashing lesson times and workload make it difficult for anyone to do more than 6. Most people just do 4, or even 2. Drea continues. Well, not that you'll have to worry about that right now. First term is set out for you. Standard procedure to make sure everyone coming in knows at least the basics. Other than that, there's not much to say. Rules are pretty much common sense, and I can lend you the rulebook later, if you're curious. There's a huge library, dueling grounds, artificing workshops, alchemy laboratories, anything you could possibly want or need that's magic-related, Drea finishes. When you put it like that, it makes me even more anxious for this week to pass, I say. Drea shrugs. These things take time. I know, I reply. The conversation elapses, and I take an opportunity to look at my status to try and get an idea of how much mana I'm using. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, my mana is still at its maximum, so the mana consumption is less than my regeneration. But I don't know by how much. It could be taking 1 mana or 10, but it wouldn't reflect in either way on my status. Either way, though, it means that I can keep using these magical tools indefinitely. The time passes quicker now that I can see as a human would, although in comparison to my memories has allowed me to determine that I can't see as far or as in much detail as I used to be able to. But it's enough, for now at least. and read through the rulebook that Drea mentioned, mostly as something to pass the time, but also because I don't want to screw up on something unintentionally and end up getting expelled. Drea was right, it's almost mostly common sense. Stuff like don't steal, don't use magic on others without a consent, and even then it's probably unwise. No fighting outside the dueling grounds, which have a whole section of rules devoted to them, and so on and so forth. Of course, the book doesn't say it in so few words, but that's the general gist of things. I also take a look at some of the maps of the Academy to make sure that I don't get lost moving around. With Manasight, it's an unlikely prospect, but it doesn't hurt to have additional information. And like that, a week passes. I hover over the auditorium on my own for the welcoming ceremony. Drea offered to carry me, but it's not like he could carry me to every class. I would end up standing out anyway, so I may as well do it myself. The people I pass gawk at me, but not as much as I had thought. By the conversations, they seem to think that I'm an oddly shaped magical tool. I'm fine with that. When I near the auditorium, it's already packed with people, ordered by how many terms they've completed. My group, the new students, is the largest, while it seems like some of the most senior groups have been placed together because of how few there are. At the entrance, there is a small queue of students being directed towards the groups by a teacher. After a short wait in line, I reach the front. The teacher takes one look at me and says, "No remote magical tools allowed. Next." "Wait, I'm a student," I protest. "Check your list for Gerald." Pausing, the teacher leafs through the list of pages before finding a name and race listed there. "My apologies," she said, although her eyebrows have hiked halfway up her forehead. Right up the front. Mentally breathing a sigh of relief, I move to join the group, hovering around chest height. Manasight doesn't require me to have line of sight, so there is no point in blocking anyone else's views. The people around me whisper and fidget, looking around at the massive auditorium and the arrayed seniors with no small degree of awe. Most of the newcomers look young, maybe ranging from 10 to 15 years of age, although some few are older and a couple are slightly younger. Others I can't tell their age because of their race. There's a massive array of races here, most of them humanoid, but others less so. Just from the ones I can name, I can see humans, elves, dwarves, goblins, orcs, fairies, halflings, gnomes, beastmen, demi-human centaurs, lamia, nagas, kobolds, gnolls, lizardmen, harpies, and a couple of mermaids in a small pool of water at the edge of the auditorium. A giant, a sphinx, a cyclops, a mind flayer, and what I think is a mimic slime, and some I can only assume to be elementals. Eventually, everyone arrives and the doors close. The lines of teachers walk onto the stage, Drea amongst them. Cleo walks, or rather drifts, to the podium and begins to speak. "Good morning, and welcome to the third term of this year at Quantem Academy." Her voice can clearly hear even at the back of the auditorium, judging by the reactions of the people there, but whether it's due to a magical tool or her own magic, I can't be sure. There are so many enchantments and magic flowing through the air and walls here that it is difficult to tell where one starts and another begins. Or perhaps it's all one spell, just moving and changing constantly. Honestly, I have no clue. Cleo continues to speak, welcoming everyone back and offering her thanks to the teachers and staff for their smooth enrollment process, but not saying anything particularly interesting to me. In other news, some of the more senior students may be happy to hear that Drea has returned from his travels and will be available this term to teach space magic to anyone with the skill and intent to learn. Cleo says as Drea waves a hand from the row of teachers. A few of the people towards the rear of the auditorium smile at the serendipitous pump their fists in response. So it turns out he's a pretty popular. I guess that makes sense. Space magic, as far as I've seen, is incredibly powerful and versatile. About another 5 minutes of announcements and such, Cleo finishes up. Thank you for listening, and now the new students will follow their teachers to the first lesson. As students have been assigned in classes in alphabetical order, please pay attention to the signs the teachers are holding so that you follow the correct teacher. The students in the second term, please follow Mr. Hartwick to choose your classes. As for the rest of you, you know where to go." Cleo stepped off the podium, and all the teachers but 4 disperse. Those 4 walk to the front. Sadly, none of them are Drea, holding up signs. Inevitably, a cacophony of chatter almost instantly breaks out around me as everyone crowds towards the teachers. Sighing to myself mentally, I hover a bit higher to get a better look at the signs. Then higher again when I notice that one is particularly low. On them are written A to E, F to J, K to P, and Q to Z. I start moving off towards the teacher holding the F to J sign when I notice a small halfling boy jumping up and down in a fruitless attempt to see the signs. He looks very anxious and is starting to look a bit panicky, so I hover over towards him. Having trouble seeing the signs, the boy looks at me for a moment gobsmacked before finding his tongue again. Yes, my name is Ouya. Do you know where I need to go?" "Sure," I say calmly. "I'm not sure if I caught your first name right. What did it start with?" "I," he replies, reacting to my calmness and visibly startling to calm down. "Looks like you're in the same class as me, so you can just follow me," I say, starting to head towards the teacher. "If you happen to get lost, the teacher is, a bit taller than you, with brown hair and a full white beard and thick glasses. I think he might be a gnome, but I'm not entirely sure." Ouya follows me, his short legs moving much faster than everyone else's in order to keep up. "Thanks. What's your name?" "Gerald," I reply. "Gerald," Ouya muses, looking up at me. "If you, don't mind me asking, what are you?" "Exactly what I look like," I state, already having expected the question. "A fork?" Ouya asks. "A fork," I agree. Ouya scratches his head. "That's just weird," he says, confused. "How can a person be a fork?" I'm not even mad, he just sounds so legitimately confused as to how I can be a fork. "I'm weird like that," I agree. "Huh," Ouya mutters and then falls silent. The teachers lead our small crowd through the corridors and hallways until we finally herd us inside a classroom labeled B1G.7. Standing up in front, he says, "Pick whichever desk you like and I'll call the roll to make sure everyone is here." Fearing that my eye would fail to make out the full detail written on the blackboard from the rear of the room, I make a beeline for the front and center desk and set myself down upon it. A few seconds later, a girl with a grubby face pulls at the chair and attempts to sit. "I'm already sitting here, thanks," I say, startling her out of the chair instantly. She gives me a strange look but moves and sits to my left without saying anything. Ouya sits down to my right and smiles at me briefly before he awkwardly notices that I am incapable of replying in kind and looks ahead at the teacher. He begins to call out names. When he gets to mine, he stalls for half a second before calling it out. I reply like everyone else, and he looks at me for a moment before shrugging to himself and continuing on. Ouya name gets called shortly after, then, right towards the end, "Joe," the teacher calls out. "Here," came a reply with a voice significantly deeper than everyone else before him, almost raspy, but I don't see anyone opening their mouth on the Manasite. I practically ignore the girls on my left replying to her name, Joyce, as a half in disbelief, half in dread. I swivel myself around to face the back of the classroom. I see an old man sitting there in the school robes, his brilliantly blue eyes looking straight at me. I turn off my eye. He, and only he, disappears from my sight. I turn it back on, and there he is. Joe. End of chapter. And that, my friends, is the end of the video. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, please consider supporting the author from the links down below. And if you'd like to support this channel, there are numerous ways listed down below. The easiest of which would be to share this channel, subscribe, like and comment, and all the other stuff that Google wants us to push. But anyways, until the next video, I hope that you all have a good one, and I'll see you then. Cheers.